Yeah. Okay. I'll just do a quick intro then from me, Graham. Do we have an intro slide, or is that the main slide?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Right. Okay. Just a quick welcome from myself then, because obviously I hand over then to HMRC, Mike, Caroline and Lindsay for this afternoon session. But just a quick say hello and welcome to another BWA and HMRC webinar, which we hope you find extremely useful, given obviously the 1st of January 2022 is not far away. So the focus of this afternoon is around the customs and excise changes that are going to be with us come January. And you can see from the agenda, Mike's going to take us through the excise policy update, Caroline through the end of stage control or the end of those stage controls, and Lindsay through the customs policy update. And then we'll go through a Q&A session. So please, if you want to raise a question, and obviously through the chat line, and Graham should be able to pick that up. I think Graham,
yes,
and coordinate and collate those, and then I think Mike, I think that's probably the best. Is to kind of impart the obviously the updates, and then have a Q&A session at the end. Yeah.
Yep, that seems good to me.
Okay, just a couple of housekeeping points. If people can, just for the benefit of the presentation, keep our microphones off and our cameras off, that would be good. Unless, of course, Mike and the team obviously presenting, that's different. Without further ado, I'll hand across to you then, Mike.
Okay, that's great. Are we okay if we share our slides for this?
Of course.
That's fine.
Yeah, I think thanks, Gaynor, for putting those up. So thanks everyone for joining us. I'm Mike Gilmore. I work in HMRC in excise policy, and I head up the team that's responsible, was previously responsible for EU exit and now responsible for what's happened since we've left the EU and all the transition issues, etc. Today is an opportunity for us to just cite you on a few things that are going to happen between now and the end of the year, and just signpost some things that you might find useful. As you're probably aware, the main changes as a result of EU exit came in for excise at the end of last year, where we moved to customs declarations and customs processes for goods moving into Great Britain from the EU, and we made various changes to legislation, to guidance, to our policies and processes, and to our IT systems. But there are some changes that are being implemented at the end of this year that, whilst that don't have a huge impact on excise, they do have a limited impact, and it is something that you do need to be aware of. So we'll talk you through those, and Caroline will talk you through the ending of stage controls and what that means for excise. And then Lindsay Neal from Customs is going to join us. I think she's joining at 1:30, and she'll give you an update on what's happening in the customs world. But first of all, I'll just draw your attention to a few things from excise policy. So if we can go on to the next slide, please, Gaynor. So a couple of things to draw your attention to. The first one is the borders operating model, and this is something that was published back in 2020 and has been updated a couple of times since. And this is a comprehensive document on gov.uk that outlines the processes for moving goods into the UK from the EU, either importing or exporting those goods. That borders operating model has been updated and has been updated to reflect what the current position is and what's going to happen at the end of the year. And it also includes details on moving excise goods. And one of the key changes since the last iteration is that there are a couple of excise case studies in there now that talk about importing and exporting excise goods. So it's quite good and goes through the process. Also, to draw your attention to some excise legislation that's been recently laid, and that was a statutory instrument that was laid on the 18th of November, the Excise Duties Removal of Alcoholic Liquor to Northern Ireland and Miscellaneous Amendments Reg. Quite a mouthful, but it's only quite a small statutory instrument, and it only impacts on three areas. And these are issues that came to light in relation to the legislation that we laid at the end of the transition period. A couple of issues that needed addressing. The first one is in relation to duty stamps, and it's just a minor amendment to address a drafting issue with the legislation. The other two areas are in relation to duty-free spirits and denatured alcohol. And the issue that we had was that as a result of the processes that were put in place for Great Britain to Northern Ireland movements, businesses were no longer able to directly move duty-free spirits or denatured alcohol from a producer or warehouse in Great Britain direct to an authorised user in Northern Ireland because of the customs processes that were in the middle. So these changes that were part of this SI were to reverse those customs processes and to take us back to the position where we were pre-EU exit, which means that you can now supply direct an authorised user, say a laboratory or a manufacturer or a university, etc. You can now supply them direct from Great Britain. So those are the main areas, but we have put a link in there to that legislation if it does impact on you. But that's as I say, the only real areas that were identified as part of identifying issues with the legislation laid at the end of last year. We've also delivered some further IT changes throughout the year. The last of those was delivered on September the 30th, and that was the final one that we required to make as a result of exiting the EU. There were a couple of issues that were identified following that update in September. One of those has been fixed. The other one is scheduled for fixing in February. That one is its impacts on businesses that operate warehouses in Northern Ireland but are based in Great Britain, and there is a workaround in place to deal with that. So if anyone's having any problems with that, we can point them in the right direction in terms of the workaround. So our attention now in terms of excise IT systems is focused on the next major upgrade of EMCS. It's an EU-wide upgrade, so we need to implement this purely in relation to Northern Ireland, not for Great Britain, and that is to put duty paid movements between EU member states onto EMCS. That's scheduled for implementation in February 2023, so we are working on that at the moment. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. The final ones that I wanted to identify were we've been undertaking a piece of work throughout 2021, looking at what's happened since the end of the transition period and what the impact has been in terms of the new policies and processes that we've put in place on a number of things, and one of those is on external excise businesses. And we are keen to find out what that impact is, where businesses have had issues, where they've had to make changes to their supply chains, routes, etc., things like that. So we have reached out to all trade associations and said that we're happy to arrange meetings and have conversations with any businesses or trade associations who want to sit down and talk us through some of those impacts. So if any of you and the BWA would like to take us up on that offer, please feel free to drop us a line and we can look to set up a meeting or meetings in early next year. We're also looking at simplifying the process in relation to movement of goods from Great Britain to Northern Ireland, particularly where the person making the declaration doesn't know how much excise duty may have already been paid on the goods in Great Britain. So we're looking at trying to introduce some simplifications to help businesses who move goods from GB to Northern Ireland. Again, we'll be looking to come out to speak to interested parties and trade associations early in the new year, just to get thoughts and views on some potential options. The next thing I wanted to draw your attention to was the alcohol review, which hopefully you will have seen in the Chancellor's announcement at the budget. And this was identified a number of areas where we are now looking to go into technical consultations and things that we want to introduce. So if you've not already seen that, happy to send the links. So again, keen to get any thoughts and views if any of you are directly impacted by that. And then finally, just to alert you that we will be looking to have our next meeting of the Joint Alcohol Tobacco Consultation Group sometime in early 2022, and the BWA will be invited along to that. So if there's any agenda items that you want us to include for that meeting, please feel free to drop us a line and we'll make sure that we cover those. So that's my general update. So I'm happy to wait there and just see if there's any questions in relation to that rather than move on.
Okay, Graham, have we got any questions from the audience?
No, there's none yet. But if you do have questions, just raise your hand or put it into the chat.
Yep. Oh, we can pick up at the end as we said. But unless there's anything, any burning questions, which don't appear that it is, I'll hand over to Caroline, who will talk us through the next agenda item, if that's okay.
Hello. Hi. Can everybody hear me? Okay. Good.
Yes.
Yes, all good.
Good. My name's Caroline Bennett, and I've recently joined Mike's team. I'll be taking over the workings around free ports and customer border strategy facing the 2050. I've got some excise knowledge, and I've been bobbing around the Brexit space for a few years while that's been sorting itself out. On the call, I've got Emma and Joe who work on my team. They will help with the more technical stuff as we go through, if there's any questions at the end. So to put a bit of context on this part of the presentation, the session is going to bring out some of the changes how we in excise are dealt with post the 1st of January in GB and non-inventory linked ports. I don't intend today to give a lot of detail about goods vehicle movement system GVMS, but at the end of the presentation I have put some links into some really good webinars that are available that customs have done. I hope I'm not stealing Lindsay's thunder by mentioning these early doors, but there were two very good informative webinars last week for hauliers. They've been recorded and will be available soon. I don't have that detail yet, but that gave certainly an overview on GVMS, what changes are coming in customs, who needs to register, how you register, etc. So do look out for those, but if I get the links I'll get them sent over to you. Maybe Lindsay has them now anyway. Okay, could I have next slide, please? So this is a bit of background where we are, how we've got to where we are. So the factors around COVID-19 and the EU transition meant that governments and many businesses just weren't prepared for the impact of the 1st of January 2021. Stage controls, customs controls were introduced. In September this year, the government did announce some changes to the timetable, introducing some import border control processes in the border operating model, but essentially the existing controls that were introduced in January have remained in place. And this includes export requirements for all goods and full customs declaration requirements for control goods at point of import. As Mike mentioned, there is an updated one that's being published, and I too have put a link in here to it. It's a pretty good read, some good stuff in there. So do have a look at it when you get the slides to you. So following the end of the transition in UK, following the end of the transition, the UK did need to have some mechanism to be able to identify goods of interest to HMRC and other government departments, and to achieve our border objectives of security and revenue collection, but obviously being really mindful, we do need to maintain a brilliant flow at the border. However, there was a lack of infrastructure at the EU facing ports, which required a tailored approach to customs controls, and the balance that we needed to get to maintain that flow of goods. And GVMS is that solution to that problem. And it was launched in, I think, December last year, the end of December, to support the pre-lodgement model for both imports and exports and to facilitate the transit movements. It has a number of functionalities available, allowing the linking of movements of goods to declarations, enabling a driver to just have one reference number on the goods movement reference, or GMR, at the frontier. So there's quite a lot of advantages there. Could I have the next slide, please? Okay, so how does it look now? So this is the as-is position, that we've got an import declaration that must be pre-lodged at the point of export from the EU. And the customs declaration is deemed as being arrived. So I've got a cat that's just jumped onto my worktop, sorry. And when the goods leave the can leave the port immediately once those goods have been arrived, unless obviously there is some intervention by Border Force or law enforcement agencies or any other of the government agencies. So where goods are moving under duty suspension, a valid movement guarantee must be quoted on the pre-lodged customs declaration, and a trader has till the end of the following working day to arrive at that pre-lodged declaration. So for excise duty suspended, the EAD must be submitted via the EMCS by the time the customs declaration is required to arrive, i.e. the end of the following working day. So that's how it sort of works now. Next slide, please. Thank you. So going forward to the 1st of January next year, a GMR, so a goods movement reference, is needed for all movements at non-inventory linked ports. This comes from GVMS, and an EORI is needed to register for GVMS. So in that line, the haulier requests a GMR, the goods movement reference, from GVMS, and this enters the declaration onto this. The goods are loaded and all the custom references are added to that GMR. So the VRN, the vehicle registration number, the TRN, the trailer registration number, or the CRN, the container registration number, are all input with the departure and destination ports details. The carrier captures that GMR and all the valid ones are allowed to board, and at the point of departure, embarkation, or the point of no return, as somebody called it, when the bow doors shut, the GMR is sent to GVMS. Those messages hit our system and then they're updated and fed back into GVMS. So it's a little bit of a run through how that works. So the changes that we're looking at, GVMS will be used to automate the arrival of customs declarations at port, all the ports operating a pre-lodgement model. For goods imported into duty suspension, this means that you will no longer be able to delay notification that the goods have arrived in GB until the end of the following working day, or delay the submission of an EAD via EMCS. So as GVMS will automate the arrival of the customs declaration as close to real time as possible in relation to the physical movement of the goods, you will need to ensure that the EAD is in place prior to the time of the crossing and ensure that the date and the time of dispatch has passed prior to its arrival in the UK. So you will need to include expected time of crossing as the date and time of dispatch. It's the main change here. Excise goods, I'm afraid, who don't have a valid EAD at the time of arrival in the customs declaration is not deemed to be in customs duty suspension, and this might result in you being liable for the excise duty, and your goods could be seized and there could be penalties. So let's hope we don't get to that stage. So next slide is a bit of a graphic for us just to see again what I've just really talked about. So from left to right, it points out the overall declaration must be made prior to the loading in the EU country of export. GVMS links the vehicle to the pre-lodged customs declaration. The goods are entered if the goods are entering into duty suspension, registered consignor creates the EAD on EMCS. The date and time of dispatch must be before the physical arrival. So GVMS automates the arrival of the customs deck, and CDS/Chief risk assess and will hold for further checks or release at that stage. If declared to duty suspension, upon release the goods travel to an excise warehouse under the cover of the EAD. Okay, thank you. Next slide. So this is about the export position. So you must submit your export declaration as arrived before your goods start their journey, and they shouldn't move without a permission to progress as a P2P. If the goods are selected for inspection, most ports will be able to check the goods on site. However, some ports might require them to attend an inland border facility, an IBF. You might see written down. After submitting your declaration, you may receive a message letting you know that the goods have been selected for a physical check route 2 or require a wet stamp route 1. The driver will need to attend either the port custom checking facility or an inland border facility. You'll need to make your goods and any accompanying documents available for inspection, and the driver must make sure that any goods he has the required the documentation stamped by board force that's to permission to progress. Okay. So I think that's how it works now. And actually, when in the new world, so the 2B model, on the next slide is basically that it's the automation of all of that. The departure messages will be provided to the carrier by GVMS linked to CDS and Chief. So that means the main changes will be fully automated. And it will link to EMCS, and the duty suspended excise movement will be cancelled through Chief and EMCS. There is going to be further advice about how the CSE, which is the Customs Supervised Exports, will operate. And when we know about that, we'll let you have notification of that. There's also going to be a full list due about how GVMS ports, which GVMS ports are going to be active on the 1st of January. Okay. Again, a little bit of a graphic again. So the customs process will occur inland. The export declaration is created while the goods are still at the trader's premises and notify HMRC of the intended export. If the goods move in duty suspense, the EAD is created, and HMRC will either give the exporter permission to export or instruct them for examination on the check via Chief or CDS. If the excise duty is suspended, goods travel to the port of export with EAD via EMCS. And upon leaving, the carrier sends exit message to Chief CDS via GMS, and this finalises the export declaration. If moving under excise duty suspension, exit messages will also close the EAD. So these next two slides are pretty small actually for you to read. I might try and put something in chat on this so you can have a look at it. But these are the suggested changes or the draft changes that we're doing for Notice 197. So it's a section 7.2.8 stage controls for imports. And the other one is, next slide, please, is about the local clearance procedures and the customs supervised export. So in green is what is currently there, and then the bit underneath is what the draft changes that we're going to be doing, or we're looking to do. We did send these out to JATCG on Monday, and we gave them till close tomorrow for comment. Given that obviously you haven't seen these before, if I can probably get them in chat, Mike, does this work if I put them in chat and then people come back to me by noon on Monday?
Yeah, that's fine by me.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll do that if that helps. Gives you a bit more time, and so rather waiting for us to send stuff out to you, we'll get them in chat during this conversation. Okay. Next slide. So as I've said at the beginning of the presentation, these are all recorded webinars that HMRC have done from fairly on, I think, in this year. The ones I've seen are excellent. Some very good information, some good graphics that takes you through step by step where what's going to happen from a customs view. Next slide, please. This is a good pointer to pages on gov.uk where you can find out about GVMS and the goods movement reference and what needs to be done. And then the next slide is our helplines. So we've got lots of support in place should you need it. We've got help desks, a CIT helpline, about general advice on GVMS, etc. So please do, note those down, but they'll come with the slide deck anyway. Is anything else? Yeah, many questions. We're going to hold to the end then, I think, on questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine, Karen. I think we should do, because I think there'll be a number of questions around that. I've got no doubt. So yeah. I think if we just, Graham, if we can collate those and pull them together in that Q&A session, that'd be good.
No problem.
I'm not sure we've got Lindsay on the call yet, because she was only going to join us at past. So
mean,
we can either do the questions now, or we can just wait and let Lindsay join. It's up to you which way you want to go, Clive.
Okay. Well, if there are any pressing questions out there, then yeah, let's take. Then please ask or raise your hand, and we can put that to Caroline. If there isn't any, sorry, there's one there. Brian.
Yes,
Right.
thanks, Clive. I've got a few questions actually. Caroline, how are we going to notify, or how is the department going to notify traders or importers about these changes with GVMS and what they need to be doing, as in they need to be checking with their hauliers and their freight forwarders to make sure they're ready for GVMS changes from the 1st of January?
there is a lot of the guidance coming out from us and from customs in the next very shortly.
But how is this going to happen? Is this going to be a letter sent to your registered traders or their VAT registered traders, or how's it going to work?
I'm not too sure about that, Mike. Do you know if we're doing a mail drop on that?
I'm not too sure. We'll part that one, and Lindsay might be able to tell us when she joins.
That's true, yeah.
Because I think it's mainly going to be customs focused. This we'll be updating our guidance, but purely in terms of the excise bits. The actual sort of GVMS bit will be customs. So I know there is stuff in the borders operating model, but there's probably going to be more, and there could well be letters sent out. So we'll pick that up with Lindsay when she joins.
I think that's an important point, Mike, because, you know, like last year when things happened, if you don't notify the traders or the importers, and they're the ones that need to make sure their freight forwarders and hauliers are prepared for this, otherwise they're the ones that you know, suffer the issues. Because Caroline, you mentioned about possible seizures and demands for duty on goods. I mean, we know in January or the first quarter of 2021, with the changes with post-Brexit, that a lot of the freight forwarders were falling foul of the paperwork. So I suppose the risk is here. Are we going to end up with a lot of goods being seized or duty demands being hit, simply where traders, you know, where the freight forwarders are just not used to the new guidance and new ways of working? I mean, how lenient are these going to be?
I think it's going to be a bit like the end of the transition period. You know, it's not just going to be an absolute sort of guillotine comes down at 1 minute past 12 and everybody, you know, has got to get everything absolutely 100% correct. You know, we are appreciative in terms of businesses, you know, need to take these changes on in. They need to be aware of them. So we will take every case on a case by case basis, and if there are any issues, we'll deal with those, as I say, on each individual case. And if there are mitigating circumstances while you know, why issues have arisen, that will all be taken into consideration, and we're happy to engage with compliance teams and large business teams if issues do come up to try and make sure that, you know, we do take everything into consideration.
Okay, sorry, Mike, just one final question. The presentation was talking about the movement of goods and GVMS and then EADs and so on. A lot of stock now moves into the UK fully bonded, so therefore there is no EMCS declaration, because the goods travel from the port through to the bonded warehouse, providing their excise and customs approved. They travel through fully bonded with no EMCS declaration.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine, and that operates just as a normal input would do. You know, in this scenario, if it's coming through a non-inventory linked or RoRo port, you know, the declaration is made to customs warehousing, and the goods will travel to the customs warehousing. There's no need for EMCS. There's no need for excise movement guarantees, and then it only becomes an excise issue when those goods come out of that customs warehouse. So that just continues, you know, as it does under the normal process for imports into customs warehousing.
Excellent, thanks, Mike.
I think Mike Liz is with us now. If we want to move on to the next stage,
we can do. I know there's another hand
is
up.
There? Oh, Dylan. Is it Dylan? Is it? Sorry, Dylan, I didn't see that. Apologies.
So I'm happy to take that before we move on, if that helps.
Of course.
Thanks, all. Earlier on in the presentation, I believe you mentioned recording duty paid stock on EMCS. Is that correct?
Yes, but that's only in relation to Northern Ireland. What's happening is, yes, the EU are looking to move all duty paid movements between EU member states onto EMCS. So we move away from the old SAAD process, but that will only apply for duty paid movements between Northern Ireland and the EU. So it won't apply for domestic UK movements, and it won't apply for UK to GB to EU movements.
Thank you. That's a relief.
I don't think we've got any other questions at this stage, Mike.
Okay, I'm happy then.
Yeah, great.
To introduce Lindsay Neal from Customs, who's going to give you an update in terms of what's happening in the world of customs as we run up to the end of this year. We have got a question that's already been asked, Lindsay, which I'll come back to when you've done your piece, if that's okay.
Hi Mike, and good afternoon everyone. And yep, that's not a problem. We can pick up any questions at the end.
Great stuff. Over to you then, if that's okay.
Yeah, brilliant. So good afternoon again, everybody, and thanks very much for having me along to your meeting today. Today I thought it would be helpful to signpost you to some recent updates and also recap on some key information and products in case helpful to members. Now, I'm going to mention quite a few products and material, a lot of which is located online, and what I'm happy to do is send a follow-up email via Mike or your secretariat so that the links and information that I mentioned is available for everyone in case they want to refer back to it. So there's extensive work that's been taking place on creating as much helpful information as possible to support customs readiness for the 1st of January. HMRC have continued to offer support to customers via our programme of live and recorded webinars, and these have all been captured online, so I'll provide you with a link to that. And in addition to the kind of standard importing and exporting webinars, HMRC also has pre-recorded technical webinars that cover some of the more detailed processes as well available. And there was recently 2 live webinars that took place on the 1st and the 2nd of November, which have been recorded, and these will be put online soon as well. So these might have been mentioned earlier on in the call before I joined, but if any members are interested in those, there will be an opportunity to catch up with them. In addition to these webinars, Customs also continue with weekly webinars, and in addition to those live webinars, we've got videos that cover many customs topics from rules of origin to commodity codes on gov.uk and also HMRC's YouTube page. HMRC are also undertaking a letter writing campaign to VAT registered businesses in GB trading with the EU, highlighting the new rules and actions to take for importing goods or exporting goods to the EU. The letters are also all published at gov.uk and pulled together into the one page, and I've got a link that I can share where that material can all be found. And businesses can also sign up to emails from HMRC, which provide hints and tips to help businesses get used to new rules for importing and exporting. Now, there's been 2 trader emails that have went out in particular that I just wanted to highlight. There's one that's gone out about rules of origin, which may be of interest to some members, and also an email covering moving commercial goods in accompanied baggage, and also carrying large amounts of cash for customs purposes. So I can provide copies of both of those emails just so that members can see the material contained within, and you can make a decision on whether you want to use any of that. There's also the border operating model, which may have already been mentioned today. That this, as you'll probably be aware, is a comprehensive document, and it acts as our go-to guide to how the border works with the European Union, and this was updated on the 15th of November, so definitely worth familiarising yourself with that and any updates that have been made recently. There's also a collection page on gov.uk that brings together customs, VAT and excise UK transition legislation from the 1st of January 2021. So this collection page brings together that legislation and customs notices that have force of law applicable to UK transition. So that this page was updated fairly recently on the 23rd of November. We've also published leaflets for hauliers that move goods between the EU and GB, explaining the new rules that they need to follow from the 1st of January 2022. And we've also updated our Freeports pages recently as well, particularly around where you can and cannot move goods into or store goods in a Freeport customs site. So that was updated in the last couple of weeks. I just wanted to touch on support available for any businesses that have questions around importing, exporting or international trade. So starting with the Export Support Service, I'm sure you'll be aware, but just wanted to take the time to share more information about the new Export Support Service from the Department for International Trade. So the Export Support Service is a new helpline and online service where all UK businesses can get answers to practical questions about exporting to Europe. The service acts as a one-stop shop and it brings together UK government information, making it easier for exporters to access advice and support. And UK businesses can use this free service no matter the size of their business or in which part of the UK that they're based. And DIT will continue to work with businesses and business representative groups from all sectors in all parts of the UK to help make the service as useful as possible for businesses. And in HMRC, we have our Customs and International Trade Helpline, which is the main route in for customers with general customs queries. The helpline is designed to handle the vast majority of operational queries, including general calls about NCTS and GVMS. And as well as the helpline, there's also web chat capability or the function to submit a question online if that's your preferred way of getting in touch. And across all customer groups, we've also got the National Clearance Hub, which supports live border movements and operates 24/7. So I can provide you with contact details for the routes that I've just mentioned there. And the last thing I really wanted to mention is just signpost members on the call to a one-off excise and controlled goods event, which is taking place on the 20th of December, 20th of December at 11 AM. This is a Teams live event, which our colleagues in Business Tax and Customs will be running to focus particularly on excise requirements. So the format of this session is planned to be a presentation with a live Q&A. I'm sure some attendees on the call will probably be aware, but if not, and if it's something that you're interested in attending, we can put you in touch with the right team that's organising this event. So that's about everything from me. Thank you. I hope this is helpful, and I'm happy to take away any questions raised today. If there's something I can't answer during the meeting, then I'll be happy to provide responses and follow up via your secretariat. So back over to you, Mike.
Thanks, Lindsay. The question that we had before, and I think you probably answered that in your update, was around GVMS and what comms is going to be in place for businesses, including freight forwarders, hauliers, etc., in relation to the implementation of GVMS. So I think you mentioned that in terms of the letters that are going to be going out and the guidance that's going to be published. I don't know if there's anything additional on that.
There is actually a few things additional that I can touch on, Mike, and also I'll be happy to share that in a follow-up email as well.
Perfect.
So the GVMS and haulier readiness, I mentioned leaflets that have been published for hauliers that move goods between the EU and GB, explaining the new rules they need to follow. There's also recorded webinars, and there's quite a substantial number of them. There's they cover all sorts of different topics. There's one about exit summary declarations. There's one about registering for GVMS. There's one about EU to GB, there's GB to NI webinars, there's ones about standard and arrived exports. So there's quite a lot, and quite recently there was a special GVMS step-by-step webinar that took place on it was actually earlier this week. It was Monday the 6th of December. This was led by the Cabinet Office with support from HMRC policy colleagues, and a recording of that event is now available, so I can supply that in case that's of any interest. But GVMS has been a massive priority, which I fully appreciate. It'll be a big priority for members on the call as well. So what we've been doing is trying to ensure that there's you know, a suite of comms and material and information out there in the public space to support with that. So in addition to what I covered on my session just there, Mike, I'll pull together some information on those GVMS products as well, and I'll send those through just in case that's helpful.
I think that'll be perfect, and we'll make sure that that goes to the BWA to circulate to members. Is that okay, Brian? Does that answer your question?
Unfortunately, Mike, sorry, but it probably doesn't, because I'm thinking more, not so much about bonded warehouse keepers or freight forwarders or hauliers. I'm thinking more about the importers or traders themselves. And at the end of the day, they're the ones that will be affected if any of the hauliers or agents get it wrong. And the advice we're being saying to our customers at London City Bond is, what you need to be doing is making sure that your freight forwarders and hauliers are registered for GVMS in preparation for the 1st of January. And I think one of the successful things that the department did last year, towards the end of last year, was sending letters out to either VAT registered companies or EORI registered companies, basically telling them what they need to be doing as a trader, to how they need to make sure they're prepared for the 1st of January. And I think a similar thing would help the trade this year. The idea of expecting these traders who are in the flows of the Christmas period in the wine trade to go on to webinars and so on, I think is very, very unlikely. A letter arriving in the post would actually be the way to make sure that they push to ensure their freight forwarders and hauliers are all prepared for GVMS, and probably hopefully give more chance of GVMS being a success. I don't know if that's possible at this stage of the game.
Yeah, I mean, from my point, Brian, I think that's a really good point. I think, Lindsay, if you can send us as much information, as much links and notices as you can, one thing we'll do through Graham is get that out to our members. But as Brian says, that really needs to go out beyond our members, you know, to hauliers, to owners of goods.
It's actually the owners of goods, Clive, is the key.
Yeah.
Honestly, and it's got to be so. I mean, a notice. I mean, I think we in the sort of the warehousing sector are used to dealing with public notices and reading notices.
Yeah.
Have our own difficulties. I think if you send that information to traders, they won't have a clue. I think it has to be very, very simply laid out what the changes will be and what they need to do as an importer or trader to assist the success of GVMS in the new year.
Well, thanks for both of those points, and I think that they're very sensible ones, as well as the kind of video and webinar content that I mentioned. There are links and written material as well, so I'll be more than happy to pull that together, as you suggested, just as much helpful detail as possible, and I'll bundle that together into an email so that you've got it all in the one place, and I'll be happy to send that through after today's meeting.
Yeah,
Can I ask then one final question? Is the answer to my question no, that the department won't be sending direct mail shots to traders or EORI registered companies?
The department's been doing this since the start of the year. There's been, you know, there's the email sign up page for the emails to go out directly, and also there's been the letter writing campaign that I mentioned earlier as well, which is, you know, the letters cover a variety of different themes, and they've been going out since the start of this year. So that those campaigns have already been underway. There's the email campaign and direct letters as well to VAT registered traders.
Right.
So hopefully, you know, if it's gone to all VAT registered businesses, the owners should be aware of what's happening. It's you know, they will have had some communications throughout the year. It's then, if we can back that up with, as Lindsay says, if we provide as much of the specific information as we can, it's hopefully then, you know, everybody that's operating within the excise area should be aware of this, and then it's up to them to make those connections with their agents and with their hauliers.
Yeah, well, we'll definitely help in supporting that, Mike. And if Lindsay, if you can get that information to Graham, we'll circulate that and focus, as Brian said quite rightly, it's getting the owner of goods to liaise with their providers, hauliers, namely, to make sure they're familiar with the GVMS requirements come January.
Yeah, absolutely. And if they're VAT registered, they'll have had those letters. So hopefully they've.
I mean, the only comment I would make is, as a company, we've got about 1,200 traders, and from the questions we're receiving at the moment about GVMS, I would say that the information is not readily out there to the traders. But the reason why I was asking, if it's not going to happen, and it sounds like it's not, as in a specific letter, then we as a business will contact all of our customers just to explain what GVMS is and what they need to be doing with their freight forwarders and hauliers from the 1st of January. So that's fine. I mean, at least we've got a clear guide on what we need to do, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
We've got another question that's come through. Kate, Atom, you've got a question for us?
Yes, just wanted to a little bit clarity on permission to progress when we are exporting. Would that be something given to exporters directly, or would it be through our freight forwarders that we're using?
Hi, Kate. Thanks very much for that question. That's not something that that I can answer at this meeting at the moment, but I'm happy to take it away to our policy colleagues and get a response back to the group as quickly as possible, if that's all right.
I think it would be to whoever makes the declaration. I think.
Yeah.
So if that's the owner, it'll go to them. But if it's a freight forwarder or an agent that's making the export declaration on their behalf, it'll go to them. So you need to have that connection to whoever's making that export declaration.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. You're right there, Mike. That response comes back from either CDS or Chief as regards to a permission to progress. So yeah, that's going to be supplied by the agent making that frontier declaration.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Just a question from me, Liz, and I don't know whether you know, but just picking up on the point of GVMS again, and do we know how or have you seen, or has HMRC seen a significant uplift in applications to gain access to GVMS and register for GVMS from the haulier community? Is there any sense of what of whether that's happened yet?
That's so thanks for flagging that question. So HMRC's behavioural insight and experience of previous controls indicates that hauliers will sometimes not take action until they need to, for example, register on GVMS shortly before they need to make a movement. So what HMRC are doing is we're continuing to work closely with other government departments, building a comprehensive set of interventions to try and encourage earlier haulier readiness activity, including for non-UK hauliers. So we've got a high degree of confidence that we're targeting the right groups and will drive up haulier readiness, but we feel that it's in a good place at present, and we're continuing to do that work to keep driving that up.
Yeah, you touch on a really good point actually, which is foreign registered hauliers, and will they have the knowledge and awareness and understanding to do exactly what we need them to do, which is to register on GVMS?
So we've been carrying out EU-facing sessions regularly with the different member states. A lot of the ones recently have focused on things like GVMS and short straights and different movements and what's required. So GVMS is it's definitely been a customs area that we've been providing a lot of information and upskilling sessions, not just with UK based hauliers, but also just in the EU space as well. So there's been a lot of time dedicated to that to try and make sure that readiness position is as healthy as possible.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Clive.
Thank you. Graham, do we have any more other questions from the floor?
Just going to ask the same question actually, but
right.
yeah, if there's any more questions, please let us know now. But if not, if you want to ask them afterwards, please send them to me following the meeting, and we can. We've got a hand up, David.
Hi there. Yeah, I just had a quick question, just going back to export via non-inventory link ports. And so from what you're saying, if it's going through a non-inventory link port, it's going to be the GVMS process, which is actually going to close the entry and thus the ARC. Is that correct?
It is, yes.
Yeah, okay. So there'll be no need to do this manual closure by submitting the C1602.
Yeah,
no need
you
to
won't
do
need
that
to do
anymore.
that. Yep.
Good. And let's say the haulier does not get the GVMS thing quite correct. Will the C1602 still be an option to request a manual closure of the export?
I think so, yes. If there's any problems with the export and it's not gone through the right process, I think you'll still be able to use the 1602 to manually do that via the clearance hub.
Okay, perfect. And just one more question. So exports that are going through an actual inventory link port, will that still process for getting the entry closed and ARC closed still remain the same by the pre-lodged entry being lodged with customs? Does GVMS play an action in getting the entry closed and ARC?
Not that I'm aware of, but I'm happy if Lindsay or Caroline know different. But I think it's just as happens now, that it's the actual chief or CDS system that will close down the EMCS movement.
Yeah, okay. Perfect, that's it for me. Thanks.
Thanks, David. Good questions.
As promised, I've just put in the chat the notice changes or draft changes and what they're currently saying. So if by noon on Monday you get back to Mike or Gaynor with any comments, we hope to get the guidance off very, very quickly on Tuesday. That's our plan, because there's quite a lot of guidance stacking up to be published. So we want to be there.
Yeah. Caroline, just one question from me, going back to the GVMS again, and the register consignor and creating that EAD on excise goods coming in from across the water. And it sounds to me that its timing is critical. So the expectation, just for clarity, the expectation is that register consignor, once the customs declaration is enacted and the goods are on the vessel sailing its way to the UK, is that the register consignor will create that EMCS movement while that movement is in process, but that has to be done before the goods physically arrive at the ports, the UK ports of entry. Is that right, Caroline?
I think that is the timing. Joe, is Joe on the call?
I am, Caroline. Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah. So as long as the EMCS deck is there when the customs declaration is cleared, to begin the duty suspended movement, I think, like we're going to put in the guidance, that time will be expected to be, during the crossing. So the date and time of dispatch would, sort of logic dictates that might be when the ferry booking is, if that information's known. But it certainly has to be in place before the customs declaration is cleared. Right.
Okay. And the consequences of not happening would be then by definition, and perhaps one for Mike as well. For definition, then those goods will fall out of duty suspension. Is that the technical positioning around that?
That's right. Yeah, it would. I mean, like Mike said before, there'd be sort of, it will be a soft landing, but in all intents and purposes, that would be an irregular importation if there was no live EAD to cover that movement.
Right. Okay. That's going to be an interesting one. Okay. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. Graham, have we got anything? Any other questions from the floor?
There's nothing else here, but if there is, Derek Robertson, you've just shared something.
Is it just posted?
Yeah. Yes. What I was wanting to know about was if HMRC were kind of taking into account that we're dealing with freight forwarders, that a lot of their staff don't have the experience that we might have experienced at one time, and So it's becoming quite difficult to manage the work that do on our behalf. So does HMRC take that into account? I mean, we've had trouble for years with things like fast parcel operators, but we're having the same trouble with freight forwarders now.
I think it's something we acknowledge, you know, that there has been issues over the numbers and the quality of some of the available forwarders, agents, intermediaries, etc. So it's something we're aware of, and it is something that, you know, the government has done in terms of funds for training and things like that. But it's not something that we specifically sort of take into consideration in terms of usually of errors and irregularities, because it's up to the importing business to make sure that they've got the processes and the right things in place before they bring those goods in. So it's not usually something that we accept as a mitigating circumstance, but it's certainly something we're aware of. I don't know, Lindsay, if there's anything that you can add to that.
Thanks, Mike. Probably 2 points there, and I think you did touch on one of them. But that's, you know, the thing with the intermediary sector is, even though HMRC have, you know, we are happy to share information of intermediaries within the sector. We don't regulate or govern the sector, which makes it, you know, which adds a kind of degree of kind of difficulty to it, I suppose, when it comes to you know, taking action against you know, or responding to kind of feedback that we're getting about freight forwarders or agents or intermediaries that maybe aren't providing as good a service as expected. The difficulty we've got is that we don't govern that industry. So in terms of taking action, there isn't a lot that we can step in and do. I think you know, and you know, forgive me if I'm picking up on Derek's point or reading too much into it. In terms of you know, in terms of taking it into account, which I think is how you phrased it, Derek. Do you mean in terms of if there was potentially mistakes made or things not done on time from a kind of compliance point of view? Is that what you're getting at? And sorry if I'm reading too much into what you were saying.
No, that's fine. No, I'm talking about things like, I mean, it's kind of basic mistakes. We can provide the correct information in terms of commodity codes and origin and all the rest of it. But when we get the customs entry back, we find out that our freight forwarders have fouled it up. We then have the problem of trying to get the amendment done. And we're trying to do that through the same freight forwarder. And it can just be a nightmare. Now, I know you said that you don't regulate the sector, but a lot of these freight forwarders are also AEOs. So I would be expecting them to be tested to high standard.
Yeah,
but
no,
they're still making basic mistakes as well.
Yeah, what I mean, it's very, you know, very sensible points that you're making, Derek. And although it's not something that I can really provide a full answer to, you know, I know that our intermediaries policy teams would be interested, you know, to hear the feedback around the challenges that you are facing, and I'd be happy to, you know, to take that away and feed that back. Obviously HMRC's focus is to work with customers to get things right, and in terms of you know, if there's mistakes that have been made, we are you know, we take instances of deliberate non-compliance very seriously, but you know, we appreciate that there are still customers that are you know, trying to do the right thing as well, and sometimes mistakes are made, but around the kind of point around the intermediaries, you know, I think it's very helpful insight and feedback around the challenges that you are facing, and I'd be really keen to kind of take that away and feed that into our intermediaries colleagues, and if there's any further steers they can provide, you know, in response to that, then I'd be happy to follow up with the group on that. I do apologise because I'm going to have to drop off of this call now because I have another session that I have to get to, but I'm really grateful for your time and for letting me come along to your meeting today. And if there are any follow-up questions, do feel free to channel them, you know, to me through Mike or even directly through your chair or your secretariat. I'm more than happy to help and follow up offline. But I must drop off now, so apologies for leaving early. But thanks again, everybody.
No worries, Lindsay. Thank you for your time. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Mark, you've got your hand up.
Yes, it's comments made about the Freeport issues. Now, as of course I understand it, because I deal with Freeports, obviously excise approval is not included in the overall Freeports approval. But what I wondered was, do you envisage that many excise-based companies are going to use the Freeports, given that they will still have to have individual excise approval? And to date, it has not been looked at particularly strongly by HMRC. I'm involved in conversations with the Freeport team concerning Plymouth in particular, which is slightly different. It's going down the route of a free zone. And HMRC didn't actually have many answers when it came to approvals and how the whole thing was going to be run. And I'm wondering if any of you guys have really thought about the implications concerning these reports and the excise side of it.
Can I jump in here, Brian Davis? Yes, we're actually opening a bond in a Freeport in February next year.
Oh, good. Which one is that going to be? The Thames Gateway Tilbury one?
Yes, yes. Well, Thames Gateway, London Gateway.
Yeah, which is the one close to you, because that's the one that I think is the only one of the Freeports that really has had any publicity. And I think in the case of being opened, am I right in thinking that the date is not long off for its full functionality?
Yes, yeah, yeah. And there is benefits to being in a Freeport as a business. Yes. Well, I mean, exactly. we've still had to apply for our excise and customs approval in the normal way, and we're still going through the pain of how long these things are taking in the new world. But but yes, I mean, you know, we've got a new one opening in February next year.
That's good, because I think that's going to be the pioneer of it, and then see how any of the other Freeports go.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Thanks, Mark.
I do actually believe once we've got the approval, I think they're going to close the doors to all other bonds in the UK from opening a bond in the Freeports.
Well, that's what I'm thinking myself, because I haven't seen much progress with the other Freeports in any case. And indeed, pardon my saying so, I'm not sure there's a great deal of understanding as to how the concept worked, given the original one was of the 80s and 90s and extended to 2012. And even then there was confusion as to really what the function of the Freeports was.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, we've been in Tilbury Docks for the last sort of 20 years, and there's been no benefit to us as a business to be in Tilbury Docks from a Freeport point of view.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's, sorry?
Exactly, because of
the
money.
Whereas, but moving to London Gateway, there's certainly some benefits from a rates point of view and recruitment point of view. There's commercial benefits to being into a Freeport. In London Gateway in the new year. So
well, fair enough. We'll see how it goes, I think.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Brian. Just conscious of time that we're now kind of overran our initial slot. So and I think we've lost a couple of the HMRC. Mike and Lindsay have left, I think, Graham, haven't they?
They have, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just bring it to a close, and I think if there are no other questions. No. Okay. Great. So just to say thank you for everybody for joining this afternoon. Hopefully you all found that of interest, and I think we had a good attendance, over 60 attendees at one point. So that's really good input and involvement. So thank you all for attending. If there's any questions that you think of, please reach out to Graham. And we'll coordinate those and place that. We'll push those on to HMRC. Have a great rest of the afternoon, and we'll catch up soon if that's okay.